Hello, everyone, and welcome into Coach Craig's Sports. This is the XFL DFS Week 5 pick live stream. So, in this live stream, in this video for today, whether you're watching live or on replay, definitely appreciate you checking out, first of all. But going to be going through some XFL DFS picks over on DraftKings, going through whether I would play them in like GPPs, cash games, or like kind of a pay down option overall. Maybe a little bit of a contrarian play. If you guys have any specific questions, if you're watching live, feel free to leave it in the live stream chat. And if you're watching on replay, feel free to leave it down in the comments and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. Before we get too started, I'm going to mention use promo code COACH over at runthesims.com to save 10%. They have an optimizer for XFL DFS over there. They have a DIY one as well where you can input how much like you think certain quarterbacks are going to take of the team's pass attempts, certain running backs are going to get of the team's total carries, and then target shares as well. You can also input like how many points you think each team is going to score, how many possessions or how many plays they're going to have in the game, their touchdown rate, their sack rate, a lot of different things you can do with that. You enter all that in, run the sims. It gives you your own projections. If you don't like doing that, you can also go based off of their projections. If you have some interest in my own projections as well, feel free to message me as well. But definitely a great site to check out and definitely useful for XFL DFS in general. So I'm going to take that off now. Heck, we'll leave it up for this point in time. But so I'm going through my sheet kind of at this point in time for this week. It's a weird week since we have that Thursday night game once again. If there's any news that changes before that Thursday night game, I'll try to make a note of it on this video as well. But when you have that Lone Island game on it, especially with two offenses in Seattle and Houston who like to throw the ball quite a bit and, have put up some pretty good point totals, it's an interesting spot overall and could make the slate quite an interesting one just in general. So going to start off with the Arlington Renegades. At quarterback, we got Kyle Slaughter. I'm guessing again. He threw 3 picks last game. He really hasn't been an upgrade over Drew Plitt, so I'm not really trusting this quarterback situation at this point in time. I do think there's opportunities for Plitt to get back into this job, especially if Kyle Slaughter struggles once again, but the play calling really hasn't been that great. So not really interested in their quarterbacks either way. Maybe if we got news like Plitt was starting and like he was guaranteed to play the whole game at $6,000, he would be a little bit interesting at that point in time. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Did forgot to make a note here on my running backs for Arlington. So Adrian Killens was cut this week. So I'm going to write that note in there too. Cut this week. So this was a pretty clear cut backfield as it was already with Davion Smith being the lead back. He's $7,500. He looks like a cash game play once again. They didn't run the ball quite as much last week. He still scored the touchdown, was still involved out of the backfield. So expect him to maintain that role. $7,500 is not a bad price tag for him by any reason. And then Kenneth Farrell behind him is $3,000, it looks like. So if there's no Adrian Killens, maybe Kenneth Farrell's a GPP pay down option if you really, really want to go there, like a contrarian play. But not really getting there myself personally. This wide receiver room is kind of a mess at this point in time, if we're being completely honest. When I went over my, target shares and snap shares on Tuesday, they're just playing like all these guys 60% of snaps or less. So not really a situation that's super interesting from wide receiver perspective. Brandon Arcanata at $5,500 feels a little rich for me. Caleb Van Esch probably be the guy I get to the most at $3,000. He's played the most snaps. He's been involved the last 2 weeks, has a little bit of chemistry with Kyle Slaughter for whatever reason. And at the flat minimum, you can take some shots there. Sean Monster didn't play last week, so don't expect him to play this week. There is a chance that he does play, especially with Javonte Payton dealing with a concussion. But don't expect him to be too involved. Even if he does play, Jordan Smallwood's literally done nothing this sweet year. And then Lawan Winningham, he had the 1 touchdown, I believe, in like week 2 and really hasn't done anything since then. So mainly for the wide receiver position, I would be focused on Caleb Van Esch as a GPP paydown option. And Tyler Vaughn's at $5,100. He's been getting the targets week in and week out. Even though his snaps have kind of gone down the past couple of weeks, he'd be a GPP option at $5,100 for me. Moving down to the tight ends, we're not interested in Nate Becker or Sean Byard. The only guy here is Sal Cannella. $7,600. You think he would be more like a cash game option with the previous connection with Kyle Slaughter, but it really hasn't done too much. This offense really has struggled to put points up on the board. So Sal Cannella, more of a GPP option once again. And then the Renegades defense. They are $5,000. I think they're a pretty decent defense. You can play them out in GPPs. You could probably use them in cash really if you want to as well at $5,000. But I'd rather pay down personally at defense. But they're going against San Antonio this week. If San Antonio starts Jack Cohen once again, this looks like a pretty good matchup for this Renegades defense. And then obviously San Antonio's line's been banged up pretty good throughout the season. For the DC Defenders, we got the dual quarterbacks once again. We got Jordan Teamu and Derek King. Teamu's $9,000. Derek King's $8,200. Teamu is still particularly the starter in this case. Derek King got the 3 touchdowns last week, which boosted up his price tag quite a bit. Probably takes him out of the running for kind of sneaking him into some lineups because you're just kind of hoping for that week in general. Jordan Teamu at $9,000. I think he could be a sneaky GPP kind of contrarian play this week, but it's not something I'm particularly going out of my way to play. If you're playing like 50 max, 150 max, something like that, that's maybe where he's a little bit more interesting. Then at running back, Abram Smith is $8,800. He's a GPP option. He's really expensive at this point in time, but he is their lead running back. Raquel Armstead is dealing with the calf injury. He didn't practice on Tuesday. He's $4,600, so we're not really interested in there. Artavius Pierce played 1 snap and ended up injuring his knee last week, and he's now on the reserve list. They did sign Raymond Calais kind of off the street. He is not on DraftKings. Probably not too familiar with the playbook either, so wouldn't expect him to be too involved. If Raquel Armstead is limited or doesn't play this week, looks like Abram Smith could get the lion's share, so very interesting GPP option in that case. Although Derek King's still been taking a lot of the rushing touchdowns overall. In terms of the wide receivers for the DC Defenders, we have we're going to start off with Chris Blair. He's $4,500. He's been pretty involved. He's been out there on the field a ton week to week. So he is an interesting GPP play. Same thing with Lucky Jackson at $5,400. I would probably go Jackson more times than not over Blair, but that's probably the way the rest of the field's going to do. Both are viable for GPP. Jacuz Lazard's $5,000. He just had the 1 touchdown last week, but still didn't play a lot. Josh Hammond plays a lot, but he's not very good for fantasy points, honestly, if we're being completely honest. So $7,100 overpriced for him. Brandon Smith was inactive last week. He is $3,000 flat minimum. Not really getting there myself personally. Josh Malone was cut either yesterday or earlier today. I can't remember off the top of my head. And they did bring Jazz Ferguson back to the team, who was with them in like training camp. Dealt with a little bit of injury. He's a big body wide receiver. He's going to probably replace Josh Malone. Not sure they're going to run him out right away this week. It might be Brandon Smith, and then Ferguson's inactive this week, but it could be him in the future, but he's not on DraftKings either way. Then for their tight end situation, it's really messy once again. So Ethan Wolf didn't practice Tuesday due to his knee injury. He's expected to be out this week at least as well. And then Brilly Moore McKinney, $2,500. Missed last week due to his injury. Should be back this week. Alex Ellis, we saw it kind of be the main tight end for them, $2,500. Those are just like pure dart throws if you're even trying to go there. I wouldn't do it personally myself. And the Defenders defense, GPP option against St. Louis. I mean, they are a decent defense. They've created turnovers at a pretty good rate. St. Louis isn't the best matchup, but if you want to roll them out there in GPPs, you could consider doing it. For the quarterback, or for Houston, excuse me, at quarterback, obviously we have kind of the little bit of a 2-headed monster here, obviously, but Brandon Silver's the main guy. He's a cash game option at $10,500 for me once again this week. Cole McDonald, $6,300. If you want to sneak him into GPP and hope he runs in for like 2 touchdowns, you could do it, but not something I'm personally doing myself. And then we get down to the running back position. Max Borghi should be back this week and lead this backfield $9,300. He is a GPP option. He's like my 4th highest projected running back, but in terms of fantasy points per dollar, not as good as a lot of the other guys that are projecting well at that running back position this week. And then the 2 other guys there that filled in for him last week, Bryson Oline and DeJuan Lee, they both are up over $6,000 at this point in time, so not particularly interested in them. Nick Holley, he's a wide receiver, but he comes in at running back on DraftKings for whatever reason, still $3,700. That's just a pure dart throw if you were even going to go there. He plays a decent amount of snaps, but not too particularly involved in the offense. For these wide receivers, Deontay Burnett is $9,600. We've seen that target share go down for him in recent weeks. So he's just a GPP option for me overall. And then we'll go to Javonte Kirkland next, who's $10,100. I still consider him a cash game option because he's been one of the safest receivers week to week. He is $900 cheaper than a guy like Ja'Cory Pearson. So there is some salary to be saved there. Travell Harris paid off last week. Expect him to be a little bit more popular this week. Just a GPP option for me at this point in time. And then Cedric Bird at $4,400. We saw him get a little bit more run last week. Not sure if that was just because Borghi was out or not, but he could be an interesting paydown option at $4,400 as well. Not particularly interested in any of these other wide receivers, Aaron Nelson, Ben Putnam, Justin Smith, and Garrett Owens at tight end. for this Renegades defense. They're GPP option. They go against Seattle. Seattle is a team that could put up a lot of points on the board, but Ben DiNucci has still been making turnovers. So would not mind the Roughnecks defense, but they are the second highest priced one overall as well. We get down to the Orlando Guardians. So Paxton Lynch is $8,000. I think he's an interesting kind of like contrarian GPP play. I don't think he's going to draw a lot of ownership once again, but he does run the ball. He's actually played relatively well. It's just the fact that they keep trying to put these other quarterbacks in. Last week it was DeAndre Francois came in for a little bit, and then he ended up with a concussion. He did not practice on Tuesday, limited on Wednesday due to concussion. I don't expect him to play this week, but something notable to watch for this Orlando quarterback situation. Quentin Dormady, who was like their third quarterback coming out of camp, he was technically the backup, played a little bit week one. He supposedly leaked plays to like other teams' quarterback or something like that. The XFL did an investigation and they can't find anything that he did wrong. So not sure what all is going on with that situation at this point in time. They since signed Quentin Flowers, but the XFL pretty much said they have to put him back on the active roster. So he's either going to get cut or Quentin Flowers is going to get cut, or, maybe DeAndre Francois gets put on the reserve list with his concussion. Not exactly sure which is going to happen out of that, but that's definitely something to monitor as we get closer to that game just in general. But Paxton Lynch, I think, is a very sneaky and interesting contrarian option in GPPs. Jermaine Martin at $6,600. There's no interest there at this point in time. They really want to split this backfield up. Devin Darrington is $3,000. He's a very interesting GPP option. He came in, he got 12 carries last week. He was involved out of the backfield. He's a pass catching scat back. This is a team that's down in games a lot. It seems like he fits their offense pretty well. So at $3,000, even if you're getting 9 points at him, it's 3x. So he's a very, very good point per dollar play just in general. So be an interesting guy there. You could probably throw him in some cash game builds if you really want to as well. And then we move down to Dan Williams. He's just an extra wide receiver for them at this point in time. So not too worried about him. Not anybody that we're playing. Andrew Jamil was inactive last week once again, so not worried about him. Cody Lattimore has led this team in targets like every single week, I believe. There may have been one week where he didn't, but he's only $6,000 still. He is a cash game play once again. Obviously, he has that built-in chemistry with Paxton Lynch. Charleston Rambo had the long touchdown last week. He's $8,100. Still not interested in him. He's overpriced. He's not getting in target share. He really hasn't done much outside of that touchdown all season. Eli Rogers, $3,400, just a dart throw at this point in time. He plays a decent amount of snaps, draws some targets here and there, but you really have to have him fall into the end zone to pay off for you, even at $3,400. Lance Lenoir would be the guy that I'm probably the most interested in out of their wide receiver group, outside of like Cody Lattimore, but Lattimore's kind of in that mid price where you have a lot of different options out there. But Lance Lenoir, $3,300. He's a GPP paydown option. You could probably roll him out in cash as well. He played 100% of snaps last week. He has a little bit of built-in chemistry with Paxton Lynch from their time together in the USFL. And I expect him to have a decent target share this week. And it seems like this should be that week that he really breaks out because he's been with the team for a couple of weeks now, really understands this offense. So this would be the week that I would really try to target him, especially in GPPs. Then we have Dedrick Thomas, the running back wide receiver hybrid. He's $3,500. He's just a dart throw, but not going there myself personally. These tight ends, not too interested in. Jalen Smith is a little interesting in being that athletic tight end, but he's just not playing enough snaps at this point in time to consider. The Guardians defense, they go against Vegas this week. Not too interested at this point in time. Guardians defense has really struggled so far this season. Moving down to the San Antonio Brahmas. So for the Brahmas overall, their quarterback situation could be a little tricky. They recently replaced their offensive coordinator, Jaime Elzonado, with Jimmy Johnson, who I would believe was their running back coach. Jaime is staying on and coaching wide receivers at this point in time. They kind of shuffled some guys around there, but we're not sure how that's going to affect this offense overall. Not sure if we're going to see a quarterback change because Jack Cohn, as good as he was the first 2 weeks, he's been terrible the last 2 weeks. And like last week, he was really stinking it up. So no interest in Jack Cohn this week. If Reed Sinnett is announced the starter at $6,000, I will have some interest. He may be a viable cash game play in that situation. They could go back and forth though. So probably throwing him out there in more GPPs than anything. But being able to pay down at that quarterback position could open up a lot of value at that higher end wide receivers. So that's something that I'm definitely interested in as well. But if you're kind of building out your lineups today and we got that Thursday game, we don't really have that news at that point in time. Then let's say you're throwing Reed Sinnett at quarterback and you're putting a Ja'Cory Pearson and a Javante Kirkland in there at $10,000. Just make sure you have some flexibility to move your lineup around. post lock after this first game as well, since there is a couple days in between tonight's game and then obviously the Saturday games as well. But Reedson, as a guy that does have NFL experience, he should be pretty good in this offense. And if they're going to be pass heavy like they tried to be last week, and if he's the quarterback, there's a lot of interest there at $6,000. In terms of their running backs, I'm not interested in any of these guys at this point in time. They pretty much have to fall in the end zone to pay off. So not really there at this point. Fred Brown's $3,200. If he remains playing the slot again this week at $3,200, he could be an interesting GPP paydown option, but guy you're just kind of taking some shots on. Travis Johnson didn't practice Wednesday due to a back injury. Hasn't been too involved either way, so not really interested in him. Jalen Tolliver, $6,600. If they're going to throw the ball as much as they did last week, he's going to be very involved, and he's going to be very interesting in GPPs. Not sure I roll him out at cash at this point, but a very decent price tag overall. Therese Roberson Jr., $3,900. Played one snap last week and got a carry. Not interested in him at all. Then we get down to TJ Vasher and Travis Toavine. They are both $3,000. If Asher plays, he's an interesting paydown option. I say here to monitor his injury status. He was limited on Wednesday due to shoulder injury. So we'll see how that impacts him going forward. If he's out once again, then Tovine's going to be a very good and interesting play. Maybe even a cash game play at $3,000. You're kind of making your choices there between him, like Devin Darrington, Lance Lenore. There's a lot of good cheap guys this week too. There's a lot of good expensive guys. So mixing and matching some of those cheap guys and those expensive guys is going to be kind of the way to go this week overall. And then we got Emmanuel Butler's there too as well. He was active last week, but he didn't play at all. So that is something to note, but don't really expect him to be too involved at this point in time. Alize Mack, Deion Yelder, not super interested in the tight ends at this point in time. Mack, you just kind of need him to have the volume and fall in the end zone. The Brahmas defense going against Arlington, I consider them a cash game defense. They're $3,900. They're one of the cheaper defenses as well. Their defense, as much as I gave it crap in the beginning of the year, especially their secondary, they've actually outperformed kind of expectations. So I do like that quite a bit. Obviously, Jim Herman being their defensive coordinator has really made a big impact on this group overall. And Arlington's offense, the play calling's terrible. Kyle Slaughter threw 3 picks last week. He doesn't look good. Drew Plitt was marginally better, but a lot of opportunities for turnovers for that defense overall. We get down to the Seattle Sea Dragons. Ben DiNucci, GPP play at $11,300. Can't really recommend playing him in cash going against a tough Houston defense at this elevated price tag. I'd rather just pay down for Brandon Silvers in cash. Save yourself $1,100. But still very viable in GPPs because he has that kind of upside. Then we have... Not worried about the rest of the quarterbacks. Morgan Ellison at running back, $7,000. I consider him a cash game play once again. He's leading this backfield very much so. Limited on Tuesday due to his knee injury. I believe he was limited yesterday. Technically, or no, not limited yesterday because that was their travel day. Technically, he's questionable to play, but he's expected to play. He played through the same injury last week, so I'm not too concerned about him overall. And with him too, it's another guy that's expected to get, 15 plus carries. And there's not a lot of guys in this league that can do that. It's mainly him, Brian Hill, Abram Smith, and potentially Davion Smith, depending on how much Arlington actually runs the ball. TJ Hammonds, Darius Bradwell, not really any interest there at all. Bradwell played a couple snaps, got 1 carry last week. Hammonds hasn't been too involved throughout the season. Josh Gordon is $10,900. He's purely just a GPP contrarian play, and he's probably even too popular to be a contrarian play overall. Don't like it against the Houston defense overall, but you can still roll him out there. Hope it pays off. Jawan Green would be the most interesting paydown option here. He's been playing more snaps as of late. He's been playing a little bit on the outside, playing a little bit in the inside. $3,700. He scored a touchdown 2 straight weeks. So he's a guy that I like a lot coming into the season. And now that he's kind of in that interesting price point with all these cheap guys, I think you should have exposure to a lot of those cheap guys in general, whether it's him, Lance Lenore, Devin Darrington, Caleb Van Den Esch. We were talking about those San Antonio 3K wide receivers. Just kind of rotating through those guys and then kind of picking the studs that you want to play alongside them definitely makes a lot of sense this week. Blake Jackson's $8,500. He's in that slot role. He's playing a lot of snaps. He's pretty consistent week to week. He doesn't offer that high end upside, but he's pretty safe play. You could probably roll him out in cash if you want to this week. Otherwise, you can still roll him out in GPPs. Probably still going to be pretty popular because his price tag isn't as high as some of these other guys. Kelvin McKnight, we're not touching. Ja'Cour Pearson, I have listed just as a GPP play at this point in time. $11,000 is just too much for me to pay in cash, even though we do have some good, cheaper options out there as well. We could try to make a cash build with him, maybe roll out him, Brandon Silvers, Brian Hill, some cheaper guys, and then kind of mix and match from there. But not sure how that's going to work out this week. I haven't messed around with that too much, but since it's that shorter week, haven't had the full chance to do so. Jordan VC's $4,900. I consider him a GPP option once again if you want to get different on this Seattle passing attack once again. Rest of the guys in that passing attack, McLean Mannix, Damian Willis, Charlie Tamoapo, who should be back this week. Not interested in them whatsoever. Seattle defense going against Houston, not interested at all. Seattle's defense is okay, but you're going against the best offense in the XFL. For the Battlehawks, we have AJ McCarron. He's $10,800. I mean, if you really want to play him in GPPs, you can. It's going against a tough DC defense as well. Then we get down to Mateo Durant, not playing him. Kareem Walker, not playing him. Brian Hill's a cash game play. It's pretty simple there, $8,000. Has one of the safer workloads in the XFL, and he's arguably the most talented back in the XFL as well. They did sign Puka Williams. Didn't play last week. He was inactive. We'll see if he gets called up or active this week. We'll put it that way. Hakeem Butler is another guy that I would consider in cash, $9,300. This is why I'm not getting to like Kirkland, just because like you can pay $900 down, why I'm not getting to Ja'Cour Pearson, because you can pay $900 down for Javante Kirkland, or you can pay down to $9,300 and get like Hakeem Butler, who scored a touchdown every single week, has a solid target share as well. So there is value to be had there in savings. You can also get to Jeff Badette, who we'll talk about later, who could look like a very good option as well. George Campbell, Gary Jennings, not interested there once again. Steven Mitchell, his snaps downtick last week, so I'm not as interested there. Austin Proel, GPP. Darius Shepard's a GPP option as well. I don't think Shepard's going to have that big boom week that he did have last week, though, but I could be wrong. Chad Hansen might have a little bit of interest there if he is active, since he's a guy that's had some NFL experience and played pretty well. But, a guy that's still recently joined the team. The tight end's not interested in. They did cut Jordan Thomas, their other tight end this week, who wasn't active for a couple games after the first week, and then he did end up playing last week. So not sure what all happened with that situation, but he's a guy that bounced around the NFL as well for a long time. Battlehawks defense, I consider them a GPP option against DC. Obviously, Tamu and Derek King can throw picks, and they're a run-heavy team, so they're not going to score as many points, or at least on paper they shouldn't. They kind of have sometimes this year, but that's a whole different story for a different day. But I still think the Battlehawks are a decent defense. You can roll them out in GPPs. For the Vipers, it really honestly just depends who's at quarterback. You can roll either quarterback out in GPPs if they start. Brett Hundley did practice in full on Tuesday and Wednesday, so that doesn't look like the injury is really concerning him. But if we get anything to say otherwise, then maybe he's kind of ruled out, and then we go to Luis Perez, or maybe Brett Hundley's playing a little bit banged up. But I think if they do go back to Hundley this week, his ownership's going to be a little bit lower because he burned a lot of people last week. You would definitely go back to it and probably get a little bit of leverage there as well. The running back position, really just interested in John Lovett at $4,900. He's not a bad price tag. He's just kind of that middle of the road price there. GPP option for me. Not interested in Rod Smith. Not interested in Torrey or Burt. Torrey or Burt could be like a hair interesting just if like we get Martavius Bryant out and Geronimo Allison out, because then one of them kind of has to play wide receiver unless they throw one of the tight ends out there more often. Not sure how that situation would shake out in that case, because the Vipers only have 5 wide receivers, unlike some of these other teams. Geronimo Allison, I'm going to be completely honest. I haven't looked fully into why Geronimo Allison missed last week, but obviously he was inactive. If he's inactive again this week, I don't know. I don't know at that point in time, if I'm being completely honest, but I'm not too worried about him. He's just a guy that I'm not playing at this point in time. Jeff Badette is a GPP option for me. He's $9,800. I want to say he's $9,700, but I could have that wrong. He's a very interesting option. He's another guy that you could roll out in cash if you really want to, especially if Martavius Bryant and Geronimo Allison are both out. Martavius Bryant has not practiced Tuesday or Wednesday due to a knee injury, so I'm kind of thinking that he's not playing for this week's game. If he does play, it's a scary GPP option, but maybe a little bit of leverage to be had there since he's been hurt all week. Matthew Sexton is a very interesting GPP option. You throw him in that bucket of cheap guys there, especially if like Martavius Bryant misses as well. just going to have a lot of opportunities. He played a lot on the outside last week. Sneak Sweeting obviously had the big game. He's a GPP option. He's probably going to be pretty popular this week since he had the 2-touchdown game last week. Tight ends, don't really expect them to be too involved. Maybe one of them gets involved if these wide receivers are out. And then for the Vipers defense, their GPP option for me, you could probably play them in cash. I'm going to put or cash here too as well. They were projecting out really well when I did my projections. I think you can throw them down as a cash too. They're going against Orlando, who's obviously one of the worst teams in the league, which both these teams are 0-4 at this point in time. So one of these teams is going to end up winning. One of them is going to have their first win of the season. So that's kind of something interesting to watch just in general. But that's just kind of my general thoughts from my sheet. The sheet is up on my Patreon at patreon.com/CoachCraigSports as well. Small monthly donation, just check that out. But I have my XFL DFS stat or my XFL stats over there too. Looking at snap shares, target percentage of carries out of the backfield, everything else like that too as well. And, it's been a pretty effective process for me so far this year. Been slightly ahead prior to last week. Then last week, obviously, got the first place finish in both the quarter and the dime contest as well. So that was a pretty nice bonus to be had there. Wish it was in a couple bigger contests so they'd get a little extra money, but just play a little bit lighter last week in general. Threw in a couple lineups less than I typically do, but still had a very good lineup in there just in general. So at this point in time, I'm going to close out of that screen. We're going to go over to DraftKings. Maybe we'll build a cash lineup, but I'll talk about kind of how I'm playing certain guys, like especially in GPPs as well, or kind of like where I would be at in terms of playing certain guys, or like what my exposure would be, like at least kind of starting off. So once again, like I'll play some Ben DiNucci. It's probably going to be less than I have in recent weeks, though. Just this price tag, $11,300, is so high. I'm going to try to get a lot of him and probably Juwan Green together. Maybe some Blake Jackson in there. I'll still get some Ja'Cory Pearson. Still might get a little bit of Josh Gordon. Probably going to get a little bit more of Jordan Vesey. I really like getting a Morgan Nelson out of their backfield, though. I don't know if I want to play him and DiNucci together, but it is something I will consider. AJ McCarron, I'll have a little bit of him. It's a tougher matchup against DC. Maybe a couple less plays since DC likes to run the ball, which will run the clock down a little bit. If I'm playing him, I want him with some Keem Butler. I want him with some Austin Proel. I'm probably not going to play that much Darius Shepard this week. I think he's just going to be a little bit too overowned. Maybe I'll throw a share in here or there. Typically when I'm doing stuff, I'm 20 maxing, so I might put one Darius Shepard line in there too as well. But a lot of Hakeem Butler, a lot of Austin Proel, and maybe even AJ McCarron and Brian Hill together. I don't mind that combination. Then we get to Brandon Silvers. Probably going to have a ton of Brandon Silvers again this week. I'm not going to lie. Going to play him with Kirkland a bunch. Going to play him with Burnett a little bit, or, an average amount. I'll probably be over the field on Kirkland. I'll probably be slightly overweight to Travell Harris, since I think his ownership will be higher this week because of the 2-touchdown game. Probably be a little bit overweight to the field on Cedric Byrd. I don't mind playing Max Borghi and Brandon Silvers together as well. So that will be something I will consider. But, they are a little expensive comparing the quarterback and them together. Brett Hundley, if he plays, I'll probably be over the field a little bit. Orlando's defense is not the greatest in the world. They did get their top cornerback in CJ Holmes last week. He is projected to start this week. But their second best corner, Javarius Davis, I believe it was, played a little bit with the Dolphins a couple years back. He got hurt week 1 very early on. He was cut from the reserve list as well. So they're not getting him back anytime soon. Brett Hundley, though, if I'm playing him, I'm going to play him with Jeff Badet. If I'm playing Luis Perez, because Perez is starting, Huntley's out or something like that, I'll play a lot of Jeff Badet as well. I'll have some interest in Matthew Sexton. I really will. He's a good pay down option this week. And if I'm stacking with one of the quarterbacks for Vegas, that is going to be something I want to target, honestly. Jordan Tama, probably not playing too much of this week. I might get if I'm 20 max, and I might get 1 or 2 shares of him, probably just one, honestly. If I'm stacking him with anybody, it's probably Lucky Jackson, might be Chris Blair as well. Deer King, it's hard to run him out, especially after a 3-touchdown week. I think his ownership will be a little bit higher because people will be point chasing that a little bit. And I don't think it's quite the savvy play as it was. It's not the same play it was when, he was like $6,800 too. So it's not like you're really saving that much. I'd rather just pay down like $200 to Paxton Lynch, who I think is a very interesting contrarian GPP play overall this week. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. If I'm playing Paxton Lynch, I have interest with him and Cody Lattimore together. I have interest with him and Lance Lenore together. Maybe you can even put Paxton Lynch and Devin Darrington together too as well, because they're going to save you a ton of money overall. Kyle Slaughter, not interested in at all this week. I think there's a chance they go back to Drew Plitt, especially if Slaughter struggles once again in this game. I did skip Jack Cohn there. He's $7,900. So I'm going to say I don't think Jack Cohn starts this week, but we don't have any official word on that at this point in time. I am recording this at 1:00 Central Time on Thursday afternoon. Obviously, that game doesn't start for a little while or a couple days from now, so hopefully we get some more news before that point in time. But if Reed Sinet's the starter, I'm going to have interest in him. I'm going to put him and Jalen Tolliver together quite a bit. TJ Vasher misses. I'm going to put Travis Tovine and Reed Sinet together as well. Now you throw in that and you throw in like another cheap guy in there, and then you can pretty much pay for whoever you want. You could probably put the Brahmas defense in there as well. And then like you can pay up for a Ja'Cory Pearson, Javante Kirkland, a Brian Hill, Reed Sinet, Travis Tovine, and like somebody else. And you don't have a bad lineup there if Reed Sinet's going out there. And if he's throwing the ball 30 plus times in this game, going to look pretty good, honestly. But that is assuming that Reed Sinet even starts. So let's see. We're going to get over to the running backs. I'll have a decent amount of Max Borghi. We'll have to see what the projected ownership looks like, whether you're pulling from Run the Sims or some other site. Hopefully we get that information sooner than later, but I'll have a decent amount of him. I don't think I'll be over or underweight to the field, really. Probably be more in line with the field. Abram Smith, I'll get a couple shares of it. It's really going to depend on whether or not Raquel Armstead plays, honestly. And even if he doesn't play, I still think Derek King snipes enough touchdown equity that it really hurts Smith overall. Brian Hill, $8,000 will be my highest exposure running back. He was when I did my initial projections, my initial exposure cap. So he came in like 87% when I wasn't putting any caps on anything. So going to be very popular this week. I still like him a ton. Kalen Balazs really won't have much of. Davion Smith, I'll have probably a little bit overweight to the field, honestly, if I'm being completely honest. Morgan Nelson, I don't know if I'll be overweight to the field, but probably slightly overweight. I do like him quite a bit at $7,000. Obviously, it depends on what his ownership comes in at. Jermaine Martin, Dewan Lee, Bryson Aline, Rod Smith, not interested in any of those guys. Darius Bradwell, this is like the dead zone of running back. So we go from, Morgan Ellison at $7,000, and the next guy that I'm even interested in is John Levitt for Vegas at $4,900. He's taking over that backfield slowly, tortoise speed, but he's involved out of the backfield as well. Seems like they like using him. Then let's see where we're at. Raquel Armstead would be like an interesting pay down option if he plays, but I don't think you have to go there. So like really all we have left is Devin Darrington at this point in time. So like the running backs I consider playing in general, Max Borghi, a little bit of Abram Smith, Brian Hill, I'll have decent amount of exposure to. Davion Smith, Morgan Ellison, John Levitt, and then all the way down to Devin Darrington. Those would be like the only running backs I consider playing this week just in general. Moving over to the wide receivers, I'll probably be underweight to Ja'Cory Pearson if I'm being completely honest, because I think he's still going to be chalky, but that price tag of $11,000 is quite a bit. I'm not going to lie. Josh Gordon, I'll play as a contrarian play, but I'll probably still be underweight to the field. I'll be overweight to the field on Kirkland and Jeff Badet. I know that already. Probably be right in line or slightly over the field on Hakeem Butler. Burnett, I'll probably be underweight because people seem like they can't get off of him. But he's not a bad price tag at $9,600. Just the target share is a little bit concerning in general. Blake Jackson, probably in line with the field at $8,500. I think he's still pretty interesting. Rambo Shepard, I'll be underweight to the field. Geronimo Allison, I'll probably have no shares of unless he plays and Martavius Bryant doesn't. Then maybe, just maybe in that situation. Sal Cannell, probably be even with the field. Josh Hammond, there's really no interest there for me at $7,100. I'd rather just pay down to Austin Proel, Jalen Tolliver, Travell Harris, Cody Lattimore. That I'd rather pay down to those guys. Proel, I have a decent amount of exposure to. Tolliver, I'll probably be overweight to the field. Travell Harris, I'll be in line or overweight. Just kind of depends on what he comes into. He's a guy that I play consistently week to week, just because I do like the upside that he does have to offer. And we saw it last week with the 2-touchdown game. Lattimore probably be overweight to the field again. He's just one of the more consistent guys, even though he doesn't always have the high end upside, but he's a very consistent guy. And at his price tag, he's not bad. Lucky Jackson's similar to kind of Cody Lattimore there. Probably be even with the field if I'm being honest. Sweeting, I'll have some exposure to, but I expect him to be over-owned after the 2-touchdown week, honestly, and especially if like Martavius Bryant's missing. Tyler Vaughn's probably maybe a little bit overweight to the field, but I still like him quite a bit, but he's kind of in this dead zone range for me. Chris Blair will have a little bit of exposure to. Jordan VC will have a little bit of exposure to. Cedric Bird, I'll probably be overweight to the field. Hopefully he plays a decent amount like he did last week, honestly. Let's see. Where's the next guy we're really getting to? Because after Cedric Bird, I don't have playing anybody until we get down to Juwan Green. We're going to be slightly overweight to the field, probably overweight to the field on him. I do like the upside that's there since they're starting to play him a little bit more as of late. Matthew Sexton is a guy that I will very much be overweight to the field on. Eli Rogers, you can throw in a little bit, might hit one of my lineups. Lance Lenore, I'll be overweight to the field on. Fred Brown, I have a little bit of exposure to. Let's see, where else are we? These 3K guys all kind of lumped together. So there's a lot of them that I'm not going to touch at all, but the ones that I'm going to touch, I think have a decent amount of upside. TJ Vasher, I'll be overweight to the field on if he ends up playing at the flat 3K minimum. If he doesn't end up playing, Travis Tovine, 3K flat minimum, going to play him a decent amount. Caleb Van Mish, I'll play a decent amount at flat 3K as well. Then we kind of get down to the tight ends, not really interested in anybody that's down here overall. And then we get to the defenses. In terms of the defenses, mainly this week, I'll play a little bit of Renegades defense if Jack Cohen is starting. I'll play a little bit of Roughnecks defense. I'll play a little bit of Defenders defense. I'll play a little bit of Battlehawks defense. But my main defensive exposure is going to the Vipers against Orlando and the Brahmas against Arlington. The Brahmas will be my highest owned defense. I'll tell you that right now. So now that we kind of talked through this, I'm going to try to build a cash game lineup. I haven't not practiced this at all for this week for cash game. So I'm putting the Brahmas defense in. I'm putting Brandon Silvers at quarterback. We're putting Brian Hill at running back. These are the guys that I'm going to have the highest exposure to at their position anyway. So they are like the most likely cash game plays for me just in general. I'm going to go out here and say it right now. I don't play like a ton of cash for XFL. It's just not a sport that is interesting enough in cash, but I'm going to put Kirkland with Silvers here. Probably going to play Hakeem Butler too as well. Kind of see where we're at this point in time. So you're going to have to play a cheaper guy down here. So whether that's your Devin Darrington, your Lance Lenore, your Travis Tovey, and your TJ Vasher if he plays, whichever guy you like for $3,700 or less, one of them is going to end up in here. So for the purposes of this video, we're just going to throw Devin Darrington there. We'll have $5,500 left over, and then we'll see where we're kind of at in terms of prices. Not playing Brandon Arcanato. This is probably where you're going to get to like a Lucky Jackson or something. So maybe this is a cash game option for this week with Brandon Silvers at quarterback, Brian Hill at running back, Javante Kirkland, Hakeem Butler, Devin Darrington, Lucky Jackson, and the Brahmas defense. I might take Devin Darrington out of here. We'll put Juwan Green because you got a little bit of a run back there with Houston and Seattle then. And then if we do that, we have $4,800 left over. So let's see exactly where that puts us at this point in time. That is not a range that I really want to be in for cash game at least. So maybe we pay down a little bit more. And then you could go from Kirkland up to Pearson. You could change Green out to somebody else. There's a lot of different ways that you could build it in that situation. But that's kind of where I'm at in terms of XFL DFS week 5 for my picks overall. Hopefully this gave you guys a little bit of insight. Obviously, we do start tonight for the 4-game main slate on the Thursday Night Football. We will be having more news as the week moves along because there's 2 days between this game and then obviously the next game on Saturday. I believe there's 2 games on Saturday this week and then 1 on Sunday. So it should be a pretty interesting XFL week 5. This is the last week of Thursday night games, so we won't have an island game quite as much. There is another week that does have a Friday game, but if you guys found this video helpful at all, please be sure to obviously give it a like. If you're brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Definitely would appreciate it. Helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your DFS. Mainly it's XFL DFS and NBA DFS right now, but we'll be having USFL DFS next month, as well as MLB DFS coming up at the very end of this month as well. So definitely a lot of DFS content coming out there. If you're interested in prize picks at all, be sure to check out my Twitter over at Coach Craig Sport. If you're brand new to prize picks too, I'll throw that code up real quick. you can use this code when you sign up at PrizePicks. You'll get 100% first match deposit up to $100. Helps you out a little bit, helps me out a little bit as well. XFLD has been a little bit tighter on PrizePicks. Haven't done too much XFL betting on PrizePicks. Did some the first week. Haven't done too much since then. It's kind of trickier too with the Thursday night game, because then you only have the one game to pick from. But you can also pair with NBA. You can pair with college basketball since March Madness is going on. You could pair with the hockey if that's something you want to do as well. Golf's going on too, so you could pair multiple sports together with some XFL plays if that's something you really want to do. But definitely consider PrizePicks. Definitely consider Run the Sims. If you're going over to Run the Sims and sign up, use promo code COACH. You'll save 10% as well. But with that being said, that's all I really have for today's video, for today's live stream. Once again, hopefully you guys all found it somewhat useful. Hopefully it helped in your process in one way or another. And then with that being said, definitely appreciate everybody that did take the time out of their day to tune in, whether you're watching live or on replay. If you have any more additional questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. But with that being said, that's really all I have for today's video. Hopefully you all enjoyed. And then with that being said, really do truly appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Definitely means a lot to me. And I hope that each and every one of you has a great rest of your day.